Maybe you'd like to talk about your coming to the Magic Castle and Jay Ose for just 3 or 4 minutes, would you?
Well,
because I'm going to need this information for a book I'm about to write.
Well, that's another story. See, I came out here about 25 years ago, and of course, I'd read Larson and Wright for years, Larson and Wright. But that was just a name. I mean, like Butcher the Coulter or Herman the Great. But Larson and Wright, I read their many contributions to magic religiously, and always, anytime I'd see the name Larson and Wright, I was always interested because they always had very superior things at that time. I mean, because there was some very inferior magic being written in those days. But Larson and Wright always had quality. And then I came out here several years later, and I gave a lecture, a so-called lecture, one of these ramblings of mine at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. And I was very flattered because I don't know how many people, but we had quite a crowd there. I think 250 or 300 people, I don't know, a very large crowd. And they must have enjoyed it because they insisted on me doing another lecture. So Jerry Larson, who was Bill's mother, very graciously offered the use of her home to give a lecture the following night after I'd lectured at the Hollywood Roosevelt. And I went out into they have a beautiful little theater out behind their house, and I gave a lecture there. And Bill was quite a young man in those days. He was a scribe. He was writing. I think I gave him a trick that nobody ever does, a card trick at the time. And Milt was a mischievous little boy fooling with the lights upstairs. He was, because they had a regular spotlight, or Klieg light as they call it in England, or whatever it is. Limes they call it in England, I think. But anyway, I had a very nice time out there, and I met the Larson family. I mean, I got friendly with Jerry Larson, and of course Bill wasn't. Bill was, the first time I came to California, Bill was living, that's Bill's father, Bill Sr., and I had a very interesting time with him. He took me out, and we met some real three-card Monte workers. I think he had a case, he was protecting them from the law or something, I don't know. They got into some mischief, and they were his clients. But anyway, he introduced me to them. We had quite an evening. But on this occasion, when I went out, I used to go out in the evening with Jay Ose. I'd never met Jay Ose before, and I returned to New York and told him what a marvelous guy Jay was, because I said he can make women love card tricks. I said women as a rule are bored to death by card tricks, but he made them love them. And Jay had a way, and they said, well, explain, how can this guy do card, what can he do with card tricks that other people don't do? I said, well, just to give you an example, I said, if you say to a girl now, give me any number you like, up to 1,000. Now, can you square that number, or give me the cube root of that number, or something like that? They hate you like poison. Or even if you ask them to take a number and take half of it, they couldn't care less. But Jay Ose used to say, what's your name, Stella? Well, Stella, have I ever met you before? No. He said, have you any uncles or aunts? And Stella looked at him, yes. Why? He said, well, just on your fingers, or don't let me know. Count how many uncles you have. And she'd go into a date and say, yes. Now, have you any aunts? And he'd say, yes. Count those. Now, how many are there altogether? She said, well, there are 9. 9? He said, all right. Now, count down 9 cards in that pack, and you'll find your lucky card. And he'd go on this way. Well, the women were intrigued. They loved this kind of thing. It was like fortune telling. And after the trick was over, they'd never say, well, how did he have the card at the 9th place? They'd say, how did he know how many uncles and aunts I had? Now, this was what appealed to people. Well, anyway, I liked Jay very much, and we got along very well. And so I went back to New York, and Jay wrote to me, and he said, why don't you come out? He said, they're going to form a magic castle out here, and he said, I think I'm going to be the bartender. Well, this was a laugh to me, because Jay had been on the wagon for some time, and I thought, well, he's going to get back in the liquor business again. So anyway, he said, why don't you come out here? He said, we got a swimming pool, and we got everything. I don't know where the pool was, but anyway, he told me. He was quite a con man, Jay. I came out here with 2 suitcases, and in those days, there was no dining room here in the castle. It was an upstairs, though, and Jay had a little cat, which was, the cat was known as Abe, because he was born on Abe Lincoln's birthday. We called him Abe. And this little black kitten, and we lived up there with this little black kitten, Jay and I and the kitten. And anyway, we had a little tiny ice box about the size of a carton. We kept butter and things and eggs, so we could have breakfast in the morning. But anyway, I came out here, as I say, to stay 2 weeks with Jay. And now it's nearly 15 years, but I must say that this castle is really a reflection of Jay Ose and the Larson family. I mean, I really mean that, because I don't think if Jay hadn't been here at the start, because Jay Ose was a fellow that could remember everybody's name. And just to give you an instant of what a fabulous memory that Jay Ose had, one time we roomed together in the Garden Apartments, which are right next door, owned by Glover. He owns the whole block here, I think. But anyway, he owned this apartment. We lived there. Jay and I roomed together. And one night, we had 2 beds across the room from each other, and one night I was reading Jay a story from the Reader's Digest, not a story, a little poem from the Reader's Digest about a man who had a dog, and the dog died, and he wanted to write a suitable epitaph for the dog. When he was going to have it buried with honors and everything, but he wanted to write a suitable epitaph on the stone in the dog's graveyard, the gravestone. So anyway, I was reading this to Jay. It was about 9 stanzas and 2 pages in the Reader's Digest. And I'm reading it, and Jay loves animals, loves dogs. And I look over, and Jay's sound asleep. He's fallen asleep. About the 6th or 7th stanza, he fell asleep. So I naturally didn't finish. I read it myself, but I put the book away. The next morning, when we were having breakfast, Jay said, "Hey, how did that thing about the dog end?" I said, "Well, Jay, you fell asleep." "Yeah," he said, "I must have, because I don't remember." He says, "The last part you read, I'll recite it to you." And he recited the stanza. He said, "That's where you left off." He recited the whole stanza, about 4 lines, but he recited. So I read him the rest at the breakfast table. So the next night in the castle, this is a positive fact, we were at the bar, and I've forgotten the chap's name, but it was some fellow who loved Robert Service poetry, and when he'd say he hunted a seal for his evening meal and all that stuff. Gee, he used to get thrilled when Jay would recite it for him. So anyway, Jay starts reciting this darn thing that I read him the night before for this fellow about the dog. Jay said, "Do you like dogs?" The fellow says, "I love dogs." "Well," he says, "you'll like this little story about an epitaph." And he recited the whole thing. I mean, he was a positive genius in memory, and I never could understand. I hear that Jack Barrymore used to have a similar memory. He could read a whole script and then, without rehearsing it, go over it verbatim. But Jay actually could do that. And I've heard him lecture down in the Salvation Army down there on Sundays, and he'd quote whole passages from the Bible, not just from the Proverbs, or he'd instead of reading them, he'd quote the whole passage, perhaps a half a chapter. I said, "How do you do it, Jay?" "Well," he said, "I just see it up there. I see it written up there, and I can read it." I don't know, he was quite wonderful. But the reason as I brought this up was in the castle, people would come in, and 6 months later they'd come in, and Jay would say, "Hello, Mr. Donaldson, or Mr. African, or whatever his name was. How's your sister Melba, and how's your little dog Tootsie?" And the guy would look at Jay. He says, "How did you know I had a dog?" Jay said, "Oh, when you were here before, you told me. Don't you remember?" But Jay was like that, and he made friends with everybody, and he was the life of the party when the castle first opened. And then Bill and Milt have been wonderful, and their mother coming in, and Irene, of course, not to mention the queen of the castle. And I told in Honolulu, Lou Derman said, "Tell him that Irene is the queen, the princess of the castle, and we have a couple of queens there too, but I'd rather not talk about them." That's what Lou told me to say, but which may be true or not, I don't know. Glad to see you all here. This is April the 15th, and we're at the Magic Castle. And our worthy president, Bill, is operating the camera. And I hope you make me look as presentable as possible, Bill, because, I'm getting older, and I should have quit magic a long time ago. But I feel very flattered that you people are here to hear me talk about the ancient art of magic. I mean, I've been at it a long, long time. I won't tell any of the corny jokes that I used to tell that Lou Derman wrote for me, but I'd just like to say that you people are very fortunate to be interested in magic, because there's no hobby or no hobby that I know of that is so fascinating and will take you where you can go visit any country, any city in the world, and you'll be accepted by the magicians and taken around and entertained and wined and dined. So you're very fortunate to be interested in magic. Of course, there are many different interests in magic. Some people are interested in collecting books, others in being politicians, being officers of a magic society. There are a great many of those, and there are a great many, happily, a great many dedicated people who are really trying to further the art and bring it to, make it more respectable, I might say. In the last few years, magic has taken a quite an upward trend, and owing to the Magic Castle and Doug Henning and one or two others, Uri Geller, of course, and I mean all the interest in the psychic and the occult is very prevalent today. But before I do anything at all, in a way, I remember this is not an entertainment. This is merely, I'm trying to help some of you who are aspiring to be better magicians, because as I say, I've made quite a study of the art, and it can be an art, and it can be a much abused art, because many people abuse the art by trying to be comedians when they're not comedians. This is the greatest fault I've found with magic, that everybody knows that laughter is a great tonic, and I mean comedians get high salaries and they get well paid, but comedians are very few and far between, even in the upper brackets of show business. So it's pretty hopeless when a young fellow who has no training, no histrionic ability of any kind, tries to be funny, because it's pathetic. It's not funny, it's pathetic. So he should just attend to his business and do the best he can, and if later on he develops some laughs during his act and different things arise during his act, then it's then he can get some laughs. But just to try to force laughter from people is almost a hopeless situation. But anyway, I'm going to start